So there is the steering knuckle. We're gonna put a little bit of grease on the bearing bore, and then we're gonna press down the new wheel bearing. Now here's our new wheel bearing. The part number is 2122455. Okay, so we're gonna get the bearing out of the box. So here is our new wheel bearing. Okay, so the side with the writings will face up here. Okay, so it's gonna go right there. Now we're gonna use the old bearing to press it in. So we're gonna press the new bearing in. All right, so that's good. So the new bearing is pressed in. So right here, as you can see, our new bearing is pressed in. Okay, so we're good to go. So now I'm gonna bring our snap ring so we can install it. I'm gonna install our snap ring first, and then we will install the flange. Alright, so the snap ring is installed in its groove. I will show it to you in a few. So now let's install the flange. So here's the flange. We're gonna grease it up a little bit first. So now we're gonna press the flange on the bearing. we have to spin the steering knuckle as we are pressing the whole bearing down. All right. All right, so we have installed the new wheel bearing. Oh man, this is so smooth right now. Okay, we got our new bearing right there. And here's our snap ring. So new bearing installed, so we're good to go. So now let's go to the vehicle and install the steering knuckle. I did reinstall this metal plate that goes over here where the axle rides onto. Okay, so remember we had to remove this to get the bearing out. So I got it back on off camera. So now we're gonna install our steering knuckle. All right, so the steering knuckle is installed. So now we're gonna install the strut bolt. All right, so now we're gonna start tightening all these bolts. I'm gonna look up the torque spec and then we're gonna torque down all these nuts and bolts. So now I'm gonna tighten these two big strut bolts, and these are 22mm bolts. So the torque spec for these two big bolts is 214 foot-pound. So I'm gonna use the gun to push them first, and then we're gonna use a torque wrench to tighten them. So I'm using the torque wrench now. So right there. Good. So now we're gonna torque the second one. So right there. So this is torqued up to 214 foot-pound. So that's good. All right, perfect. So now the next step is going to be torquing down the bolt for the ball joint. Now the torque spec for the ball joint bolt is 52 foot-pound. So that's good. These two bolts are torqued. So now the next step is going to be installing the wheel speed sensor. After we install the sensor, we're going to install the splash shield and then the rotor and the caliper bracket and then the brake caliper. Okay, so I'm going to bring this vehicle speed sensor, this wheel speed sensor wiring around here. I'm going to wipe down the sensor and then I'm going to install it. Alright, so the sensor is installed. We are making progress. So now the next step is going to be tightening this nut over here for the sway bar link. Alright, the sway bar link is tightened. So now we're going to install the splash shield. Alright, so this guy is going to be installed. Alright, the splash shield is installed. So we are making progress. So now the next step is going to be installing the brake rotor and then the caliper bracket. Alright, so we got the brake rotor installed. Alright, so we're going to install the caliper bracket. Now the caliper bracket bolt torque spec is 52 foot-pound. So we're gonna torque them up to 52 foot-pound. So good. I hope you heard the torque wrench click. So that's good. Awesome. So now we're gonna install our brake pads. So what I'm doing right now is the reverse process of the removal process. So pretty much everything we did backwards to put everything back together. Okay. Now these pads are not worn out. The pads are good, so we don't have to replace the pads. All right. So now we're gonna put the caliper bolts on. So the torque spec for the caliper bracket bolt is 23 foot-pound. So that's good. All right, so we're good to go. So now I'm gonna bring you on this side so we can tighten the axle nut. We're gonna torque down the axle nut and then we're gonna install the outer tie rod. After we install the outer tie rod, we're gonna put the tire back on. So now we're gonna torque the axle nut. The axle nut torque spec is 216 foot-pound. So 216 foot-pound. So right there, so this is torqued up to 216 foot-pound. Good. So that's awesome. So now we're gonna use a little teasel so we can crash this axle nut. So we're gonna crush this over here. All right, so we're down to our last step, which is installing the outer tie rod. Now the torque spec for the outer tie rod nut is 55 foot-pound. So now we're gonna torque this to 55 foot-pound. All right, so this is torqued. We're good to go. I'm gonna put a cotter pin here and then we're gonna install the tire. All right, so we got everything back together. Let's double check everything before we install the tire. Everything is back together. All the bolts are tightened. Okay. Here is our new strut. The outer tie rod is tightened. I put a cotter pin there. So we're good to go. So now let's install the tire. Alright guys, I'm gonna leave it right over here. This is how you remove and replace a front wheel bearing and a front strut on this 2011 Toyota Highlander. At this point, the last step is torquing down the lug nuts. I'm gonna have to lower the vehicle and torque the lug nuts down. The torque spec for the lug nuts is 76 foot-pound. It's getting late here. I will do that tomorrow morning before I test drive the vehicle. So I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.